Hi, everyone. Judge Andrew Napolitano here for Judging Freedom. Today is Thursday, April 25th, 2024. Tony Shaffer, Lieutenant Colonel Shaffer, is our guest this morning. Tony, always a pleasure. Welcome
Judge,
back
good to be
to
here.
the show, my friend. Thank you.
Good to be here.
What is the status of the Ukrainian military as we speak?
At the very moment we're speaking, there are multiple gains by the Russians. Multiple villages near Avdiivka are falling. This has been going on since the vaunted vote on Saturday, where apparently that $61 billion is somehow going to save Ukraine and everything that's going on. And literally, one of the best sources right now that people can reach out and look. Forbes, Forbes, and mainstream media outlets finally admitting that the Ukrainians are sending in unprepared equivalent of National Guard forces to go to the front to try to defend some of the villages which are falling. And this, let me take a quick left turn and point out something. These battles are happening village to village. Sometimes the Russians are taking meters. I mean, they're fighting for meters. And the whole idea that somehow out of the blue, with the constant churn of Russian military just trying to do what they're doing, they're going to turn and become Patton's Third Army and roll into Poland. It's science fiction, and I think that's what they used with Mike Johnson to get him to vote. Somehow that these Russians are superhuman. They're not superhuman. They are well equipped. They've trained and become battle hardened based on the 2 years of war. So that's what they are. That reality of them being engaged in trench warfare, and again, they're going village to village. Avdiivka is the area that they're currently moving forward in. The idea they're going to change from trench warfare, which they've had to engage in, both sides, mostly Russia, because they had to do the lines of defense. Uh, Somehow they're going to become this mobile unit that can roll over Europe is beyond fiction. But the bottom line is, without belaboring the point, and getting down into each village they're taking or not taking. And again, you can go look at Forbes right now. The Forbes article is out. It talks in good detail about this if people want to go get a deeper dive. But the bottom line is the Ukrainian military is not doing well. They're desperate for conscripts, and the only thing, that money that we're sending, the collective West is throwing in. The European nations are throwing in some too. The only thing that money is supposed to do is help Biden politically to get past November before the Ukrainian military falls. That's what I think the 61 billion was all about.
Do you accept the observation of your colleagues, Colonel McGregor, Scott Ritter, Larry Johnson, and others, that what the Ukrainian military needs more than anything else is manpower,
Oh yeah.
and
Oh, yeah.
they've just about run out?
Go back and check the tapes, you and your audience, 2 years ago. I said, one of the issues is going to be ultimately that there's no way Ukraine can stop Russia without finding outside sources of support that includes outside combat personnel,
Right.
manpower.
I
And I
remember. I
said it again,
remember you. I
and I
remember
said
you
it,
saying that.
and I said it last year again. So yeah, ultimately, the Russians are using aggressive attrition, which that's not my term. Alexander Mercolis from the Duran uses that term. I want to give him credit. I use that term now because he uses it, and it's true. They're grinding down. They're demilitarizing Ukraine, Judge. Oh, and by the way, they're demilitarizing the West, right? And Joe Biden is a willing participant in watching. If you don't like Putin, but somehow you think that us throwing all of our military gear into this war constantly and letting him grind it down is benefiting us. I want to sell you a bridge in Brooklyn
All
because
right. So the 61 billion that the House and Senate just passed and the president signed into law, we know that the lion's share of that, we've heard everywhere from 40 to 45, doesn't even leave the United States. It
no,
stays right here and goes directly into the military industrial complex.
right.
Does Congress even know that?
Yeah. Oh, of course. That's one of the benefits that was briefed to him. It's like, oh yeah, Ukraine, but it's going over to Raytheon. I said the other day on the network, Chris Salcedo, last Friday, I was on the network, and Chris asked me about who do you think briefed uh, Johnson on to get him to change his mind. I said, oh, I don't know, Raytheon, Boeing,
Right.
it's like all this, all they knew, Judge. The members of Congress knew exactly where it's going. And I'm going to say this, I may get in trouble for it. I think CIA orchestrated it all. I think Bill Burns, who is almost as evil as Brennan, John Brennan, they're like two sides of the same evil coin.
Right.
Has been working behind the scenes. And let me say this for our audience. I know the audience doesn't like me sometimes. That's fine. I don't care. Simply because I'm trained by CIA, I'm not CIA. CIA is leading this whole war. It's not the Pentagon. Pentagon helping out? Unfortunately, the Pentagon is helping out. But the CIA has orchestrated this. They continue to run it. They do everything they can, both domestically and foreign and overseas, to prompt this perception management effort to get everybody on board that we can still win.
Well,
The
what
media
will
will
the
come back.
61 billion achieve on the battlefield other than delaying the inevitable
That's it.
defeat?
Speaking of perception management, there was no stopping of weapons during this time when the money ran out, Judge. Just so we're clear, Ukraine continued to receive material, weapons, logistics, all that stuff kept coming. So it's not turning back on now. It's been in the pipeline. Some of the defense companies took it on faith they were going to get their money. Of course, they are now. So that's what it's just funding the momentum of the defeat is all it is, because again, I'm speaking as an analyst and observe the fact that the Biden administration is acting politically using national security as a tool. They engaged in this war. It's not gone well. A lot of us said from the beginning this was not going to go well, and somehow we were pro-Russian simply because we're saying the numbers don't add up. The numbers still don't add up. The numbers look worse than before. Now they're counting, Judge, on the F-16 showing up over the summer. Oh, the F-16s. Yeah, maybe 20 years ago. It's not going to have any effect.
Here's
And yet they're
here's Jake Sullivan. I want you to tell me if you think he's being truthful. This is cut number 8 on the new sheet, Chris, talking about Ukraine funding delays and the gains the Russians made. This is in direct defiance of what you just
yeah,
articulated, Tony. So let's listen to him, and then you
sure.
can have at it.
And the consequences of the delay have been felt in Ukraine. Over the past 6 months, Ukraine has had to ration ammunition, and that has resulted in the loss of some territory in the east, including the city of Avdiivka. And while today's announcement is very good news for Ukraine, they are still under severe pressure on the battlefield. And it is certainly possible that Russia could make additional tactical gains in the coming weeks. Russia has tried to grind out very slow, costly progress on multiple fronts over the past few weeks. They are threatening the town of Chasiv Yar. They are threatening settlements to the west of Avdiivka. And of course, they're raining hell down on Kharkiv and other cities across Ukraine. The fact is that it's going to take some time for us to dig out of the hole that was created by 6 months of delay before Congress passed the supplemental.
Is that true?
No, he's lying. He's the only truthful statements is the Russians grinding things down. I said that earlier in our interview, that those villages that he listed out are all in danger. Yes, I just said that. Forbes is saying that too. But there's no delay in weapons. The issue is production. The West cannot match what Russia's doing right now. Russia, for whatever reason, probably to their advantage, never abandoned the Soviet format for industry. That is to say, they always set up a certain capacity to switch their economy from peacetime to war. That was a decision made by Gorbachev, all the other leaders early on as they transitioned out of being the Soviet Union to being the Russian Republic. That capacity has been turned on. Now they're on wartime. They're just outproducing the West. They're producing 105, I think 155 or is it 155. It's one of the higher caliber artillery rounds, 7-1, 7-1. And things have continued to show up. There's been no turning off. People didn't turn the spigot off, Judge. It's not practicable stuff. And think about this also. Takes some time, 6 months just to get things there. So during that 6 months, things would have been showing up. What he could have said, it may have been truthful, which I don't think he would. He doesn't tend to tell the truth. He said, "Oh, the pipeline ran out over the 6 months of delay. Now we got to get the pipeline going again." That would have been believable. That would have been believable. But what he said is absolute. Oh, the money's out, everything stops. It doesn't work like that. This is
Well,
a modern environment.
that's a
Oh,
political statement that he made. But
it's
here's
a
another
political
one.
statement.
Here's another political statement, Tony. You're going to have a field day with him on this, claiming that in the U.S. we have doubled our monthly production of 155 millimeter artillery rounds. You'll
Yeah.
understand the significance of that in the new list, Chris, number 9.
Since the start of this conflict, we've more than doubled our monthly production of 155. By the end of this year, we will have doubled it again. And as a result, we're going to be able to provide from our own production steady and significant supplies of artillery to Ukraine. We are also providing Ukraine with new capabilities. I'm able to confirm, as you've heard from others, that in February, the president directed his team to provide Ukraine with a significant number of ATACMS missiles for use inside Ukraine's sovereign territory. That shipment started moving in March as part of the PDA that the president authorized on March 12th, and those missiles have arrived in Ukraine. This followed Russia's procurement and use of North Korea's ballistic missiles against Ukraine, as well as Russia's renewed and escalating attacks against civilian infrastructure in Ukraine.
So let's talk about the first part, and then I have some questions about the
Yeah.
second. Is this true that the United States has doubled its production of 155 millimeter artillery rounds and then doubled it again? Does he know what he's talking about, or is this more political claptrap?
There's been significant increase, but when you're only talking about an increase of maybe from 1 to 2,000, which is not significant, it's like, okay, that's like saying I've doubled the number of cookies I'm baking per day. It's like, okay, you've gone to the store and opened up a package. It's that equivalent. It's like, okay, whatever. And plus, one of the two main plants we make artillery rounds burnt. It's out of it's down, and that capacity is down. So you're not going to be doubling it again. That's science fiction. And then there's a plant in UK. The UK supplies are going to go down too. So it's all a lie. Let me say this though before we get into your questions. Why are we playing Putin's game? Why are we going and it's like, when has the Americans ever decided, oh, we're just going to slug it out with an enemy based on what they have as an advantage? Like, we usually think our way out of this stuff. It's like, yeah, we don't want to be in trench warfare. We're going to go another way. And this is what I've been saying. I'm a Reagan guy. Reagan's folks, who I still talk to, I talked to a couple this week. It's like they were always looking for ways around the strength, the Russian strength. Don't go into strength, and yet that's what they're doing here. Oh, we're just going to let it slug out. And I would argue they're sacrificing a whole generation of Ukrainians simply for this appearance that they're being strong against Russia. They're not going to win playing Putin's game of aggressive attrition, and yet that's what they're doing. That's what Jake Sullivan just said. Oh yeah, we're going to play that Putin game, and in the process, they're going to just continue to wear down our capacity to actually create credible deterrence down the road in Europe. It's insane.
The PDA to which he referred, the Presidential Directive Authority, authorized on March 12, that allowed long-range missiles with 190 to 200-mile distance available to them. When these things hit Russia, when they arrive into Russia, when they hit Russian military or Russian airfields in Russia, is the United States prepared for what the response might be?
The answer is I don't think so, because they're also proposing at this point an expansion of the number of U.S. forces on the ground. Let me be very clear on this, because
On the
we've talked
ground
about
where, Tony?
in Ukraine. We have, even now, and even though they're trying to keep it low key, we have providers, logisticians, and advisors all there. That I think the intent is to kind of open the kimono a bit more to show that we have a lot more there than has been acknowledged. And I think they want to do more. So this directive is not only about missiles; it's about people who provide support to those missiles. And I think that's where this is all going. The Biden administration is bent on getting us engaged in World War III. I can't speak to the motives. I have folks that I talk to on a daily basis trying to discern what those motives may be. I have theories, but I don't want to get in trouble by saying them at this point. But I'm just saying that everything they're doing is trying to play at Putin's level and do things to antagonize Putin to get him to expand the war into other places.
How
I,
many
I
how many troops do we have on the ground, and do you know if they're in uniform or in civilian clothing?
They're not in uniform, and except the French Foreign Legion is Western troops, not U.S. troops. The French Foreign Legion was there as special forces folks. I don't know what they look like on the ground. I know the Russians figured out they were there, but that wasn't us. Right now, based on the current configuration, we've probably got upwards, I want to say 15,000 in some form or another. And those folks are all,
15,000
oh yeah.
Americans on the
Look,
ground in
Judge,
Ukraine?
Judge, we don't have when we do something, we don't have a small footprint. Let me break that down. About 7 of those 1,000 are administrators and providers of logistical support. Another 3,000 are individuals relating to CIA and the intelligence collection and gathering effort to include going out and being out in the field and doing things. So, and then you've got another, I don't know, 5,000. My numbers may not add up here perfectly, but I'm just giving
Understood.
estimates. There's another 3 to 5,000 that are engaged just in general activities, helping the Ukrainian government govern, do the different things. See, all these things that would do. We are literally trying to make Ukraine the 51st state of the United States by all the activity we're doing. And
Have any of them been killed or
oh
injured?
yeah, yeah, they have been killed. But again, there's been no reporting on this because the policy is if someone is killed or injured, there's no reporting on it at all. There's a blackout. This is the Biden
And
policy.
so and so the government, the Biden administration, has duped the entire media, the way
Yes,
the mainstream media, which it feeds and which is in bed with it, and even the
absolutely.
alternative media like this and other similar programs that challenge the government. We've all been duped. None of us have been told the truth about Americans being killed in Ukraine. Do I have
No,
that right?
you do have that right. And again, it's pervasive. What again, they do it by money. Remember, some of this money that they're throwing around to Ukraine comes out of U.S. coffers and is used for what I call information shaping operations. They're trying their best to make sure if anything happens, that those people who it happens to are well taken care of and are basically bribed into submission. Not saying anything.
Does the United States think its capabilities are limitless?
That equation, that that premise has not been considered, I don't believe, at the senior level. Again, I'm not in those rooms. I was in the old days in the Trump administration, but I'm not in those rooms now. And I think the Biden administration is committed to this course of action, no matter what it takes. So I don't think they think of it as unlimited, Judge. They think of it as we're going to do it no matter what it takes, even if that means ruining our forces in other areas. Remember, right now, and I don't want to get into this because it'll be a whole other discussion. They want to challenge China. They just spent a bunch of money for Taiwan. We've got the Middle East. So I can only say that the policy they've put forth and continue to promote for Ukraine is one of unlimited support with no cap. And to do what they're talking, if they're seriously trying to challenge Russia, you're talking about essentially trying to find a path to get more troops on the ground there. I think that's why they're now talking about opening up the kimono about more U.S. forces being there. This is all about doing things to be provocative and find a path to get U.S. troops on the ground and engaged in Ukraine is what I see. And
So if you know and can state publicly about 15,000 Americans on the ground, and you've even been kind enough and astute enough to break down the various categories there. Surely FSB, the Russian intelligence, and
of course,
President Putin are aware of that. They probably not only know how many, they know who and where.
So everything I'm saying is speculation based on experience and watching this movie before. But to your point, yeah, I'm sure that they have figured out because the Russians. One thing I have noticed about the combat, and by the way, just as a point of policy, I refuse to go on Ukraine or Russian media. I will not go on either because there's a war. I'm not taking sides. I'm trying to be clear in my assessments. And with that said, I am certain that the FSB has great insight on what's going on. And part of what's going on here, Judge, is these missiles, which are going to be used to go into Russia, these people who are going to be on the ground will become targets of Russia. The FSB is going to know they're there. And the FSB, have given intelligence to the Russian military to strike and kill French Foreign Legion folks. It's happened. So I think again, we're looking at an escalation that the Russians know that we're engaged in. There's no way you can continue to say the USA we're not engaged in the war, yet you're giving them lethal support and personnel support, which is giving the Ukrainians advantage. The Russians are going to see that as an escalation, and it's going to see the United States as a combatant. It is what it is. There's nothing. That's not me. That's the way things work.
Here's Foreign Minister Lavrov, Tony, almost immediately following the vote in the House over the weekend. Cut number one.
Currently, the United States and its NATO allies persist in their fixation on dealing a decisive blow to Russia. They seem prepared to keep opposing our nation, using Ukraine as their last stand, so to speak. Simultaneously, Western nations are precariously teetering towards a direct military confrontation involving nuclear powers, carrying potential catastrophic outcomes.
Sounds like they take it pretty seriously, Tony.
Yeah, they do. I hadn't seen that clip, by the way, and yeah, I'm glad. Lavrov agrees with me because I'm seeing it the same way he is. And yeah, and again, I'm just looking at this as a guy who spent 30 years advising, doing nefarious things to get the truth out, find the truth, to provide the truth. And the truth is, I've seen this movie before, and yeah, Lavrov is correct. And I'm not pro-Russian, for God's sake. I'm just
Okay.
saying what he's laying
Does
out is correct.
Has Washington even considered the prospect that Ukraine could lose? Because
Oh, they know
according to you and McGregor and Ritter and Johnson and McGovern and the others, this game is over
it's over. It's been
this
over.
year in 2024.
They know, Judge. They know. They know. That's why they were so desperate to get this money passed, so they could do two things with that money. They handed out a lot of consolation prizes to the military-industrial complex because they were owed money because that support never stopped over the 6 months, despite what Jake Sullivan says. They owed money, so they paid that off. They're paying off other folks who invested in the concept of a free Ukraine. The best outcome for Ukraine at this point. And again, I'm saying this as an American who wants to see the best for all sides here. I'm a Reagan guy. I want to see peace. Is that Ukraine becomes the equivalent of Switzerland? That you basically have a neutral Ukraine. You allow the Russians for now to maintain what they have. I would go for, as I think Musk even proposed, you have referendums, votes to see where the people in those regions the Russians have taken, see what they want to do. If they want to stay Russian, they stay Russian.
Well, Tony,
Uh,
that is very rational what you're suggesting, but you also know that Joe Biden will never allow negotiations intended to
no.
produce that result before Election Day.
And that's what I'm saying. It's like this is all about trying to get the Biden administration and their failing policy past November, because this is going to be seen, rightfully so, as another Biden failed policy, probably worse, much worse than Afghanistan. And let me say this, because I said this over the weekend and I got a little heat for it. I'll just say it here on your show again. What has Joe Biden ever done regarding policy that's actually worked out well? I mean, it's not going to work out. So giving him $61 billion more over a failed policy is the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. There's not going to be a different result. It may be delayed, but it's still going to be inevitable.
How much longer can Ukraine survive, even with whatever fraction of the 61 billion ends up there?
I just don't see them lasting much past June at this point because the Russians aren't even trying hard. Not to say that they're not fighting. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that the Russians have not put together in a purposeful way a complete air-land campaign designed to gain ground rapidly and hold it. Right now, they're continuing their policy of aggressive attrition. It's working. Why would you change tactic if it's working? So there's like, yeah, we're doing what we're doing. And again, earlier in the interview, Judge Jake Sullivan correctly identified Russia's wearing the Ukrainians down. That's what they're doing.
Right.
So they're preparing right now, I believe, because the Russians took out that big antenna for the one of the media outlets there in Ukraine. I think they're preparing to return to the offensive. The moment they return to the offensive, probably June, the Ukrainian military is going to collapse from its own internal pressures. This is going to be
You startled me with
meltdown.
the 15,000 Americans
Well, I
there.
mean, I would like people go out and check me.
No, I'm not
I
saying I
challenge those
disagree with
watching.
you. I'm saying it's
No, no, no,
startling
no, Judge.
that they're
I'm
there
just
and we
saying
don't
that
know it.
the U.S. media should go out. They should say, "Oh, we don't believe Shaffer." Go out and check it out.
Right,
You go
right.
check.
Okay,
No,
but
not you, Judge,
here's my
but the U.S.
question.
media should go check it out.
Here's my question. How many other Western troops and from what countries, if you know, are on the ground? The
I don't know.
Brits, the French, the Germans.
So I know the Germans are reluctant. They've been asked for one of their high technology missiles to be deployed to Ukraine, and they've refused because you got to have German technicians there to help run them. So the Germans are saying, "Yeah, we don't want to do it." So the Germans have been a lot more reluctant. The British have a lot of folks on the ground. I have to check with some of the British guys to find out what their numbers are. I know they're there. I don't know the numbers. And obviously, they have volunteers from a number of NATO nations that have shown up there, which I think are way better organized around NATO command and control than they've been acknowledged. I NATO has said publicly several times that they're not a combatant. That doesn't mean they're not supporting some level of informal coordination to move volunteers from different NATO nations there to help out because that's
Are they armed? Are they protected by armed people, or do they just walk in the streets in civilian garb?
so it depends. It depends where they're at. So those who are up close to the front, I think, are heavily protected. If they're U.S. military or CIA, I think they're armed. Traditionally, I mean, I've dealt with CIA in the field before. CIA typically will organize around and use private military concerns. You know, things like Blackwater. Just saying, Eric, if you're listening. And they'll use those organizations to provide some level of support and direct access. And they're all armed, and they're pretending to be some other organization than CIA, but they'll be there and they'll be armed. And they'll be up towards the front. All these others, logistics providers, coordinators, they're all unarmed, running around in the rear area, very subdued. But I mean, obviously, they're coming and going from military facilities within the Ukrainian military. So that would be observable. And again, if the media wants to go out and check this out, go. I mean, just open your eyes and look around. It's amazing what you'll see. With that said, there was one U.S. reporter that's been killed by the Ukrainians, which nobody ever wants to talk about. Gonzalo, I can't remember his last name,
Gonzalo
but
Lira?
yeah, Gonzalo Lira. So we have the Ukrainians are not digging the idea of a lot of scrutiny of what they're doing. So I'm just saying, if the U.S. media decides to pick up on this and go do something, be very careful because the Ukrainians are not going to willingly give up information about who's supporting them and how they're doing it.